Hey Patreon, this is Travis. Wanted to talk today about perceived security. I mentioned it very briefly on the YouTube video I posted today, but I wanted to make a video for you guys. I've picked the worst spot to stand and do this. I didn't even realize this. This is how good of a outdoorsy guy that I am. I set my tripod here and talk, and then I turn around and look, and I'm surrounded by poison ivy. So I'm standing in a spot where there is none. So I want to make sure that I don't move around too much and step on the poison ivy. There's some kind of over here, and there's some over here behind me. So I'm totally observant today. Anyways, wanted to talk about perceived security. And I mean that from a couple of different things. Not just the actual physical security, like guarding your property, guarding your home, protecting your home. But I'm talking about the security of the peace of mind that you're prepared for something. I think this is the most dangerous area for preppers, preparedness people, is that we become complacent in a certain area because we have this perceived security that things are all right. I have a law enforcement background, so I saw security. I saw it firsthand, and I also saw that the American people have this perception that certain things are safe, or that certain things make them safe. One of those is that law enforcement makes them safe, that law enforcement is there to serve them, that law enforcement is there to protect them, and that's not true at all. In fact, the Supreme Court has upheld that the local, your police departments have no legal obligation to actually protect you. This was a case that happened several years back, that they have no legal obligation to protect you. Their obligation is to investigate and aid in the prosecution of crimes. But there's no, so law enforcement is a reactionary thing. It's not proactive. It can be. There are many instances where police and sheriff and other law enforcement agencies actually do protect people and prevent crime. But they have no legal obligation to do that. Same way with your home. You have this idea that when you leave your home and you lock that door, that your house is safe. Maybe you even have an alarm system, and you have this perception that because I have that alarm system, it's going to keep people from breaking into my home and stealing my things. When I go to work and I lock my car door and I go inside, my car is secure because it's been locked. My grandfather once said that locks only prevent honest people. They only keep honest people honest. That's it. Because if I'm a criminal and I want to get into your home, your lock is not going to stop me. Your alarm system is not going to stop me. I'm going to get into your home. It's just that simple. I'm not a criminal. I've never broke into homes, but I know that if I needed to, I could be inside a home really quickly. That's just how it is. And the American people have a lot of perceptions of safetiness and security in our lives. Most of the times, they're just that, perceptions. They're not reality. So from a preparedness mindset, we have to not allow complacency to slip in. Complacency can be a killer. For as an example, some people I knew, they a few years back, they went and bought like a 2 or 3 year food supply, like the number 10 can freeze-dried type stuff for the whole family. They bought enough for 2 or 3 years, and they had the money to do it. So they stored it in their garage, and they had this sense of security that if something happened, they had 2 or 3 years of food sitting there, that they could, at least have food. A few years went by, not very many, I think maybe 3, and they decided to crack open a can and see what the stuff was like, because they hadn't even tested it. They go out there and they start going through it, and the stuff had gotten rancid, cans had busted open, was spoiled. The problem was that they stored it in a storage barn, shop, garage, something that was not climate controlled, and had gotten too hot in there, and the stuff had spoiled, and a huge majority of the food that they had bought wasn't any good any longer. They had to dump it out. So all along they had this perceived security, this safety that, that we're going to be fine, that if something happens, we have 3 years of food for our family, that we can just walk out there and open a can and eat it. The reality is they didn't have that. Had become complacent. They didn't go out there and check on it. They didn't think about and do a little research. Just because it's sealed in a can, does it need to be in a more climate-controlled, environment? And it does. And so they not only lost all that money, but they were kind of starting back over, and then the thoughts that even though nothing had happened, that if something had happened, they would have been really bad off because they did not have that safety net there that they thought they should have, that they thought they did have. So this is something that can happen in a lot of areas. Firearms. It's why you should practice regularly. You should check them regularly. There's just too many times that something malfunctions, and it's because that gun is set there for years and never been used. It's bolts seized up because it got dry and rusty and no one checked on it, and then you need it in an emergency and you go in there and well, it doesn't work. Medical supplies. We have this perceived security that we have what we need, or that we have enough, but we may not, or that they're still good. Certain things can go bad when it comes to those. Food, obviously, I've already mentioned that. There's other areas. You have this idea that maybe you're secure, you're able to secure your property and your belongings, but a lot of times you're not. So how do you get away from having this, perceived security? Again, complacency is what causes it. So the opposite of that is you have to be proactive. You have to be constantly, regularly checking things, regularly reevaluating. This is something that I've mentioned many, many times in my videos, is that we have to constantly reevaluate our preparedness plan. You should have at least some kind of preparedness plan, whether it's intricately detailed, written down, or kind of an outline, and then the rest of it may be up here. Either way, you need to have a preparedness plan that you are working on to keep yourselves prepared. But you need to constantly reevaluate that. Don't just sit down and write, and you may write down the perfect preparedness plan. It's absolutely amazing. I mean, it's so good. You think maybe I should have this published and sell it. It's such a good preparedness plan. But things change. Your life changes. Situations change. Your family changes. The world around us changes. It changes constantly. It's in a constant change, just all the time. So that preparedness plan might need to change also. You need to constantly go back, every few months, maybe quarterly. Quarterly is usually a good time to do that, I think. If you want to do it more often, monthly, then that's great too. But at least quarterly. Sit down and read through it and figure out if it needs to be adjusted. That's also a good time to go through and make checks on your food, especially the long-term stuff. Your short-term food supply that you are working out of, like your working pantry, you should be checking that very regularly. But the long-term stuff that's sealed, you should be checking that probably quarterly. Go in there and making sure that it's still sealed, making sure that it's something didn't get busted open, that somehow bugs or mice got into it, whatever that is. So making these quarterly checks. Same way with firearms. If you're not, you may have certain guns that you're not using all the time. So you need to go in and shoot them at least quarterly. Clean them, break them down, clean them, get them good and lubricated and ready to go. Inspect medical supplies. Go over your security plan for your home, your evacuation plans, your get home plans. Go through your car, make sure your bags in your cars are good. Tires, your spare tires, anything like that. Check the tools, that everything is there that you need functioning. This should be done on a regular basis. And it's one of the things that I have found that preppers kind of tend to not do as well. Even the ones that are really good at getting all the gear and the stuff and the food and the plans, and that sometimes the inspecting, the checking, the making sure that everything is still functioning and usable kind of falls to the wayside. And then we develop this sense of, this perceived security that things are going to be okay if something happens. And then something happens and things aren't okay because your stuff doesn't work. Your stuff is no good. It's spoiled. It's broken. Whatever it is. That's what's going on in our country. You know, we have this perceived security that maybe you and I don't, but a lot of people do. That things are going to be okay. Food supplies are great. You know, politics is just politics is normal. You know, massive illegal immigration influx. It's okay. We've got plenty of space, plenty of money, plenty of food to handle it. It's all right. It's all right. No big deal. We have this perceived security. It's mostly because we're being lied to. For those of you that still watch mainstream media and keep track of politics that much, they're lying to us. And so we get this perceived security. We have to open our eyes, do the research for ourselves, and think logically, rationally, to establish for ourselves our own, you know, perception of what's really going on out there. And it's the same way in your home when it comes to your preparedness plan and supplies. You need to constantly be reevaluating, constantly be checking things, because stuff happens. Just like the people that I mentioned. They had 3 years food supply and almost every bit of it was gone within just a few years because they had not stored it properly. And they lost a lot of money, and thankfully nothing bad had happened, but if it had, they could have been in a real bad situation. So stay on your toes, and I know most of you do, but stay on your toes and keep track of this kind of stuff, because, you know, it's the things that we just never expect that hurt us the most, that hit us hardest. You may sit there and plan for every possible scenario you can think of, and then it's usually the thing that you forgot to plan for is what actually happens. So, anyways, that's kind of my word for the day. Thank you all, again, so much. I really love you guys over here on Patreon, and I know I've neglected you, and I apologize for that, but I'm working on changing that. So, alright, well, thank you much for watching, and I'm going to try to get out of this poison ivy patch that, like a dummy, I totally wasn't even paying attention. I was like holding the gear and stuff, trying to find a good spot to stand, and then I'm like, oh wow, right in the middle of poison ivy. Well, have a great day, and I'll catch you in the next video.